Okay, hey guys, James Russell here, and look, I've been thinking about how to make this channel work the best, and I think the easiest way for me to learn how to be really good at this channel is to get back to basics. So today, I'm going to start at the very beginning, and what settings you should use for your project when setting up in your DAW. So roll the tape. Okay, so what settings should you use? Well look, you need to think of the fact that your computer is a giant sampler, and when I say that, the first thing you need to think about is sample rate. Now sample rate is exactly what it sounds like. So if we were to get a sine wave, which flows like this, that's known as a full oscillation of a wave, that start to finish when it goes all the way up, all the way down, hits the next point. That's usually what's known as one cycle. And a sample rate, essentially, what it does is, because that's a continuous wave, the computer, it will take millions of tiny little snapshots or little bits of information, kind of like what they do when making a movie. When they shoot 24 frames a second, they're shooting 24 still frames, you speed it up and it makes it look as though it's moving. The same principle is applied to making music. So that's what sample rate is. Sample rate is taking that many bits of information per second and putting it in the computer and putting it back together. That incidentally is the reason why so many audiophiles and other music boffins like to say that things like records and tape are somehow better than computer music, because it's digital and because it's truly analog, so it's got constant oscillations and it's not just taking these little digital snapshots. Because digital, if you take that sample rate down to something really low, you'll actually find that it sounds really crunchy and distorted, and that's what digital distortion is, and it's the thing we're trying to avoid. So sample rate, I personally prefer to use 48K or 48 kilohertz, which means 48,000 times a second it's being sampled, for a couple of reasons. Basically, I like to do what's called downsampling. Now, downsampling is basically the idea that you have whatever you're creating, if you're the original creator of it, you're going to have the best quality product of it, and then essentially downsampling means that you can then output it to whatever the file formats are, which are usually of a lesser quality product. It's the reason why you try and achieve the highest quality product initially, and essentially then you're downsampling or sending it out to whatever formats. Now, this is especially true when making music, because I record at 48K 24-bit or 32-bit float, and I'll talk about that in a second. But essentially then downsample it to things like CD, which is 44.1 16-bit, and things like MP3 and all the rest of it. Now, Pro Tools, now Apple only recently brought out Mastered for iTunes, which is actually the file format 48K 24-bit. So my argument would be, at the very least, you won't be downsampling then, you'll be outputting to that exact sample rate. So that should be the very minimum you go if you want to have the highest quality product out in the world that once you've made your music. Now, I've got a couple of mates of mine that disagree with that, and they like to record at 44.1. They're generally hardcore and heavy metal guys. And it's totally a valid argument. Most DAWs are set to 44.1 by default, and I would definitely encourage you to go and actually do a shootout, make a track, have a listen to the different sample rates. You have to do it at the very start of the project, which is why I'm talking about basic setup at the start, and see if you can tell the difference. I've done this before and certainly can. Most digital audio workstations and good quality converters, which usually come in your interfaces and the like, can even go up to what's called high definition, which is 96 or 192 kilohertz a second. And what that means is essentially that's for high definition, and I only ever use that for classical music. Because I have actually done a shootout, I think 48K is kind of the sweet spot where you're getting a high quality product, but you're not, because your project files and everything else get so much bigger the more you're sampling, because you're getting more information, which is essentially more to work with, it can get ridiculous. So 48K for me is kind of the sweet spot, 48K 24-bit or 32-bit float. Now, we're getting into bit rate. Now, bit rate, so if sample rate is how many times a second it's been sampled, your bit rate is the depth of that sample. So, how can I put this? In the old days of computers, when operating systems were pretty clunky and weren't very sophisticated, you only had like 8-bit depth and stuff like that, and you'll hear some of that really old school lo-fi, which is what they talk about, a lo-fi kind of sound. Your bit depth is essentially not only it's kind of the amplitude of the waveform, but it's also the amount of headroom you've got, and how soon or how quickly you're able to get the digital distortion if you say clip it and the like. Now, since 64-bit operating systems have come out with really good quality computers, and most computers are these days, they've actually been able to achieve what's called 32-bit float. Only about 5 years ago, the most you could achieve was 24-bit. Which meant there was a lot of headroom, you're less likely to clip it, and 24-bit is kind of the standard sample rate that you're going to output to. But 32-bit float, what it essentially means is if you can record in 32-bit float in your system, once again it's that theory of downsampling or having a higher quality product, but 32-bit float means that you've actually got like a buffer above whatever you're recording, as far as headroom, which means that you're less likely to clip it. Now, that's not only great for someone starting out at the beginning, but it's also great in any kind of shape or form. So it is really, really important, if you can, try and get 32-bit float, or at the very least 24-bit. Things like CD get bounced down to 16-bit, and essentially your bit depth is the top and bottom of your amplitude wave. So there you go. So essentially, sample rate is definitely worth having a shootout, both of those things, and with bit depth. Bit depth is how likely you are to clip it and get digital distortion, all the rest of it. And it's 32-bit float, it means you've kind of got a safety net. So there you go, guys. These are in your audio settings in your DAW. They're definitely worth knowing about. I have mentioned before on the channel, but they're definitely worth knowing about, and it's definitely worth doing a bit of a shootout in regards to those things. One little tip I will say, one little musical tip I will say, that you need to think of your computer like a sampler, and therefore sometimes everything you can do inside your computer, you can over-sanitize your music, and that's why whenever I'm trying to make any kind of music, I'll always try and introduce something that's been humanly played, composed or put together into whatever session, especially if I've got a lot of synths and stuff going on. So put a bit of guitar, a bit of human voice, a bit of shake, a bit of tambourine, something really organic to really bind the track together again and make it feel as though it's that human kind of thing. Otherwise you end up feeling like you're listening to a robot that's made music. So computers can definitely do that. So taking that into account whenever you make music, add something really organic, can really enhance the flavour of whatever the music you're making is. Anyway, so there's my little bit of blurb on the settings that you need when you first open up your DAW and start your project. Hope that was useful. As I said, go and have a look for sample rate and bit depth. It'll be in your audio settings and how it interacts with your interface. And yeah, if you liked it, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave me a comment, and I will catch you next episode.